Ask people watching the Ontario Liberal leadership race what they think of Ted Hsu, and you basically get the same answer. Really nice guy, but can he win? It's a question Hsu knows he'll need to face head-on if he's going to be competitive against three better-known challengers. But Hsu does have one thing going for him that those other three don't have, and that is a seat in the legislature, from which he could hit the ground running should he win. And with that, let's welcome the MPP for Kingston and the Islands. There's Ted Hsu. Nice to have you here in the studio.
Good to be here.
Is this really the first time you've been in here?
This is the first time. I've watched the show so many times.
Okay, well, long overdue. Good to have you in that chair. Let's tackle that first question right off the top there. He's a nice guy, but he can't win. True?
I'm a nice guy. I think it's an asset in politics. And I'm determined to win this leadership race. And I've won before. In 2011, that's when I first got elected as a federal MP. That was the worst election showing ever for the federal Liberal Party. No shame to lose that election. I won my seat, and I even increased the Liberal vote, so I can win.
In fact, I think history struck twice in that front, because you won when Liberals all over the country were losing.
That's right.
And then again, when you came back into public life in 2022, you won a seat again when Liberals all over the province were losing. What do you think that says?
I win by, first of all, building a team and connecting with people. And I think I can connect with people who might lean NDP or lean Green or lean Red Tory. I think it's the most important thing is to connect with people and earn their trust. And I know that I've done that in Kingston. And that's how I can win when the party is losing.
So tell us more about that. What do you say your unique selling proposition is to Liberals who are watching this right now?
I want to help Liberals win by earning the trust of people, by traveling around to meet people in person. I think that it's very important to meet people in person to earn their trust. I think it's important, here's where the nice part comes in, to be fair and respectful when you're criticizing the other parties, because people will believe you if you do that. And I think we should put forward some bold policies, because people are hurting. They're worried about cost of living and the healthcare crisis. They want to see that we're serious about these issues, and we're willing to even lose a couple of votes because we're willing to put forward the policies that we believe in. That's another way of earning trust.
You won't be surprised to hear that when I talk to supporters of yours, they say having a seat in the legislature is a real asset when you want to be the leader of this party and hit the ground running. You will also not be surprised to hear that your three opponents don't think it's that big of an advantage at all, and that they think they won't have any trouble getting back to Queen's Park when the time calls for it. Okay, make the case. Why is it a big deal?
Let me start by saying there's a bit of experience that I have that none of the three other leadership candidates do, and that is I have 5.5 years of experience as an MP and then an MPP as the third party in the legislature. None of them have that. And the winner of this leadership race is going to spend 2.5 years as leader of that caucus in third place in the legislature. There is no budget for the leader's office because we don't have official party status. And so I've got to work with the caucus, the very talented caucus, bring out everybody's talents, and the staff that we have at Queen's Park. And so being a member of the legislature and being able to work with caucus on a daily basis, being able to face Premier Ford and his ministers, being able to face them in the legislature in question period and in committee, and being able to place motions and bills and questions on the order paper. These are all things that I can do as a member of the Ontario legislature.
Okay, let's talk experience. Bonnie Crombie would say, I was an MP too once upon a time, and I've run a big city and been re-elected twice, having won the initial time out as well. Yasser Naqvi's been an Ontario cabinet minister, and now he's an MP as well. Nate Erskine-Smith is an MP as well. He's been an MP for 8 years. So they think they've got you covered when it comes to experience. Are they not right?
I've got a lot of experience, as I mentioned earlier, as a member of a caucus in the third party in the legislature. Journalists don't come to you right away. They go to ministers, they go to the official opposition. You've got to earn your coverage. It's harder to raise money. We've got to rebuild a party. But I've also got a lot of experience outside of politics. I worked in science. I worked in business. I managed a business line. I ran a sustainable energy association. And I put that together with my experience, the right kind of experience in politics, experience in the position that I'm going to inherit when I win this leadership race. And I put that up against any of the other leadership candidates.
We're going to come back to that in a bit, but I want to talk about some of the news that you made the other day when you announced your triumvirate that will be your campaign co-chairs. And one of the names there I think will be quite familiar to most Ontarians, and that's Greg Sorbera, the former finance minister of Ontario. Here's what I want to know. I gather you two have never actually met. You've spoken on the phone, but you haven't met. So how did you get him?
You'll have to ask him that question, but I spoke a couple times with him on the phone, and he asked around. He went around and talked to other people who know me, and I'd invite anybody to do that. And I trust in what other people say about me. And I have great respect for Greg. That's why I gave him a phone call and asked for his support. And I'm very, very fortunate to have his support as somebody who can offer a lot of guidance and advice.
He was, I mean, let's face it, he's a big name in Ontario political history. He's been president of your party. He was a cabinet minister back in the David Peterson days, never mind in the Dalton McGuinty days. But all these things are a double-edged sword, you know. I mean, he was a big advisor to the last guy who held the leadership of your party as well, and that didn't come out too well. You worried about that?
Well, Greg, he was around when the party needed to be rebuilt before Dalton McGuinty won the leadership. He's got a long history in the party, and so from my point of view, he has a lot of advice to offer. I think that you have to learn from history. Steve, you have written a lot about political history in Ontario, and there's a lot to learn from your books and from studying history and learning from it.
I hear those books are boring. I wouldn't waste my time if I were... No, anyway, let's move on here.
I've read some of them.
Have you really?
Yes.
I thought you had better things to do with your time than do that. Anyways, let's look back. You were, as you pointed out, an opposition MP in Ottawa from 2011 to 2015. And here's a little bit of you in the House of Commons in your final question period. Sheldon, if you would.
But this is also the silver lining of climate change. If we solve it, we will have set an enduring precedent for cooperation amongst the entire human species. Instead of obstructing the international community on climate change, why doesn't this Conservative government cooperate, and why do they not address growing inequality at home and around the world?
Good question.
Why did you want that to be your last question in Ottawa?
You know, climate change is something that got me into politics in the first place. I started thinking about what my kids had to face. And I realized that I couldn't just take care of them, feed them, read to them, play with them. I had to do something about the problems that they're facing. And my daughters keep bringing me back to politics.
You got two girls.
I have two girls.
20 and 13?
20 and 13. And they say, Dad, we want somebody to do something. We just want somebody to do something. Climate change got me into politics. I wanted to repeat that theme as I left federal politics, and it's one of the important things on my mind right now.
You did something unusual. You walked away after one term from a seat that you surely could have won again. Why did you do that?
Well, Steve, going back to one of your books, The Dark Side. You wrote a book called The Dark Side about the toll that politics can take on personal lives if you're not careful. My wife and I decided in 2014 that running again, even though a big part of me wanted to run again, wasn't right for our family. And we decided that kids are only young once, but the world will always need good politicians. And right now, we are facing so many crises, I would say, at the same time. And I'm ready to run. I'm ready to run in this leadership race and win, and hopefully lead this province in a couple of years.
Let me find out more about that journey, because you stood down in 2015, you did something else for 7 years, and then you decided you wanted to come back into public life, this time at the provincial level. Again, how come?
I never really left politics. I was a campaign manager in 2018 and 2019. I worked on a municipal referendum. The mayor of Kingston asked me to co-chair his housing task force. But the provincial nomination was open, and I think that every one of the critical problems that we're working on are multi-jurisdictional. They involve the federal government, the provincial government, municipal governments, Indigenous governments. And there's no hard problem that the provincial government's jurisdiction doesn't address.
In those 7 years, when you were sort of in between elections, you mentioned some of the things that you did. What'd you do to make a living, though?
Well, I had savings, so we just lived. But we got involved in a bunch of things. First of all, we had to take care of elderly relatives. We also volunteered to run robotics clubs for kids. I got involved in some startup companies as well because I wanted to understand the challenges that we have in turning all the great research and development that we do in this country into commercial success. And so I worked with startup companies, coached robotics teams, and took care of elderly relatives, and stayed involved running election campaigns.
When you decided to come back into public life at the provincial level, you actually challenged, I think if I remember this right, you challenged the former sitting member for the Liberals, Sophie Koala, who had that seat before.
Right.
Okay, that's what we call in my business kind of awkward. How did that all go?
Well, we kept the nomination contest very, very civil. I think Sophie has a lot of respect in Kingston. And we just kept it very, very positive, the whole campaign positive, and I think it worked out.
Okay, because she clearly didn't expect to be challenged for a seat that she had previously held, and then in walks you, and you say, sorry, but I want it too.
Well, it was an NDP seat at the time, and the nomination was open, and a lot of people encouraged me to run.
I'd like your view on where you think the Liberal Party needs to be in 2023. And you know there is a big debate happening in the party right now. You've got, for example, Nate Erskine-Smith saying, well, we need to be right over there on the progressive side of things and unambiguously plant our flag there. You've got Bonnie Crombie already in the race saying, on the contrary, activist center is where it's at for me. Where does Ted Hsu want to bring the Liberal Party?
So I don't think of it that way. I think of who needs help. So when somebody is having trouble paying the rent, how do we help that person? And for me, it's not an ideological question. We should be looking at who are we not serving? And for me, there are many answers to that. One of them is the Liberal Party has not lost its connection with rural and small town in Northern Ontario. So instead of asking, should we move right or should we move left, we should be asking, how should we be serving rural and Northern Ontario and small towns? Because we've lost touch with those parts of Ontario. And so I'll leave it to other people to look at the party and say, is it going right or left? But let's focus on who we're not serving.
Okay, let me follow up on that, because I mentioned you've got 3 new people who are co-chairs. One of them's the former guitarist for Tragically Hip, right?
Rob Baker.
Okay, that's not a bad get. And you've got Cerbera, and you've got Carol Mitchell, who's a former agriculture minister in the province of Ontario, used to represent, I think, Huron-Bruce riding?
That's right.
Okay, so that's rural Ontario. And I presume if you've talked to her, she's told you the Liberal Party is absolutely nowhere in rural Ontario right now.
Yes.
How are you going to bring it back?
Well, first of all, I want to say that it's not such a stretch to bring it back, because you only have to go back about 15 years to Dalton McGuinty's second majority, when we still had a lot of Liberal MPPs from rural and Northern Ontario.
That's 15 years ago, which in politics may as well be 100 years ago, though, right?
I guess, but in my life, in human years, I don't feel it's that long. I think the important thing is to go out and talk to people. And having the advice of Carol is very, very important. But we have to go out, we have to put out policy early. So I think in the last election, the Liberal Party strategy was to hold back policy and to try to make a bigger splash by holding it back. I don't think we should hold back. I think we should be listening to people right away, putting out policy early, nominating candidates earlier, getting volunteers out, knocking on doors, listening to people saying, hey, we're here. I don't believe there's ever going to be some magical policy that is going to make people in rural and Northern Ontario suddenly vote Liberal. You've got to put out some policy to show that we care, that we're relevant, and then you've got to spend a lot of time and a lot of legwork going out, attending events and meeting people.
Very fair point, because you didn't lose rural Ontario overnight. It certainly took place over a course of years, and presumably getting it back will need to take years as well. Having said that, could you advance one idea, share one idea with us here tonight on something you think, okay, this is consistent with my Liberal values, and I think rural Ontario would go for it as well?
One of the things that's going to happen, that we know is going to happen in the next few years, decades even, is that I think Northern Ontario is going to develop because of the mining of critical materials to fight climate change, to electrify our economy. So all the infrastructure in Northern Ontario is going to be really important. I recently, as I was driving from Timmins down to North Bay, I got to drive on Highway 11, and I got to see the condition that it's in. And there's a lot of places where there's no shoulder, there's no rumble strip. If the weather were bad, it's not a pleasant road to drive down. But it's part of the Trans-Canada Highway, and it's going to be a crucial part of infrastructure in the north. And I think it should be treated as a crucial part of provincial infrastructure because the mining of critical materials in the north is going to be important for the whole Ontario economy. And so I would upgrade that highway to treat it like a provincial piece of infrastructure.
Now, the current government of Ontario, were they here, represented at this table, would say, okay, you're putting a campaign idea in the window based on a policy that they think they are the big winners on, right? They're trying to do Ring of Fire, electric vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. Do I infer from your position that you would endorse all of the provincial subsidies for Stellantis and for Volkswagen in southwestern Ontario, et cetera?
What I would endorse is things that are wins for the people of Ontario. And if the provincial government is doing something right, I'm not going to get in their way. One of the things that I think that the provincial government is doing right is they're putting money into skills training. And I would put even more, because I know that the request that went out for proposals was way oversubscribed. So I don't have a problem saying the government is doing such and such a thing right, because I'm not out for glory. I'm out I'm not out to like pound on the Conservatives. I'm out to do good things for the people of Ontario.
Having said that, you are vying for office in an age where politics, at least by my reading and that of many others, has never been more toxic. How do you stay the nice guy in public life when everybody around you is throwing mud?
Well, I think a lot of people who talk to me, they say like they're frustrated with the politicians fighting each other. They want things done. And so if I go to them and say, hey, I'm going to do it differently, I'm not going to take cheap shots at Doug Ford. I'm going to criticize him. I'm going to criticize him firmly and fairly, but I'm for you. I'm out to try to get something done for you. I think people will respond. And it's not in my nature to do negative attacks and take cheap shots. So I don't want to change, but I really believe that politics will be better off with my way of doing politics.
Well, you do have one thing that I think no other politician that I've ever interviewed before has on their resume, and that is you're a PhD in physics from Princeton University. How does that help you be a better politician?
Well, you have to solve a lot of hard problems in physics. You have to understand a lot of things quickly. But let me give you an answer which is maybe not expected. In science works because you're always checking what you're doing. You're always saying, oh, is that right? You're checking your work. And there's this sort of scientific humility that works. And it works, science works. But it works because you're always willing to accept that you might have to change your views or maybe you did something wrong. And that humility works in science, and I want to bring that humility to politics. I think that humility of always checking, asking somebody if they think you're right, if there's some fact that I'm missing, that will be good for politics, and that's what I want to bring to politics.
I hope Conservatives won't misunderstand this next question that I'm going to ask, but it's pretty apparent from the results of the last two Ontario elections that the biggest chunk of voters wasn't looking for a PhD in physics from Princeton University. They were very happy having a guy as premier who was not a brainiac, if I can put it that way. Are you concerned you're too academically smart for the job?
Sometimes you can make a connection with a physics background or a science background, but there's a lot of other things in my life that I can make connections with. And what's important is to make connections with people. I take care of my aunt who's in long-term care. Well, I'll share that with my brother who's doing a lot of the work, so I can do this run. We worry about our parents. We worry about our kids. There's a lot of things, a lot of ways. I like fishing. I like playing softball. There's different ways that you can connect with people, and I'm not afraid of my background. I think if people are worried that we have hard, complicated problems, why not have it's not a disadvantage to have somebody with my background, not only in science but in other fields, as part of the team that's trying to tackle these problems.
In which case, I'm going to ask you one last question focused on your background. I gather because your thesis was focused on getting a better understanding of the large U. Hubbard model and a theory for high-temperature superconductors. Ted, what in blazes does any of that mean?
So superconductivity, these are materials that conduct electricity without any resistance, without any energy losses. Those materials are very difficult to work with. And we're hoping that it's been several decades, but it may take a few more decades for them to be in widespread use. But there's always these technologies in the background that could make a difference. One of them in energy is nuclear fusion, which has had a lot of advances in the last few years.
You should speak to the guys at Pickering and Bruce and Darlington about that. That might come in handy.
Well, their jobs are not in danger because it's decades away and we're going to need nuclear power for a while.
That's Ted Hsu. He's the MPP for Kingston and the Islands and vying for support at this year's Ontario Liberal leadership race. Ted, thanks for coming into TVO.
It's a pleasure to be here.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.